Souls, Dark Souls, a game series so iconic, developers are inspired and try their best to create similar action games known as Soulslike, in an attempt to recreate that magical formula of challenging action RPG with epic bosses and exploration to relive a true fantasy adventure. Many Soulslikes have tried to reach this Everest, many failed and some horribly, but some have gotten close, and for Lords of the Fallen, after the latest patch, it has gotten closer. Alright, done with the cringe voice. I'm Poir, and this is my review for Lords of the Fallen. Thanks to Hexworks and CI Games for giving me an early review code. Mid making this review, 9 hours before embargo lifts, they put out a patch that made the PC performance much better. So now I gotta scrap all the complaining and give you guys more points, dang it. Anyways, old script continued. Yeah. In terms of being a Souls game, Lords of the Fallen may be the closest game to do so, as in actually being like Dark Souls. Did that perk your ears up? Yes, there are good things about this game that I enjoyed, and more importantly, that they did right. However, two issues kinda make the game a chore to play, in my opinion, and hold it back from reaching that coveted From Software status. We'll keep it simple, gonna list what's good about the game, what it nails right, and what it does wrong, either subjectively or objectively. So if you like my non-shill honesty, hit like on the video, and let's begin. Good. Combat. I enjoyed the combat. You have all the hallmarks of a Souls game here, but your parry is a timely guard akin to Liza P and Sekiro. You got a dodge roll with overly generous distance and iframes. The weapons' movesets are varied and offer the player extreme playability in whether they want a fast-hitting weapon or a slow big one that has huge reach and damage, or if they want to go range and shoot with spells or with various throwing objects. You have one-handed, two-handed, dual-wielding, running attacks, charge attacks. You can swap between movesets mid-animation, going from a two-handed stance to one-handed seamlessly. Spells are strong and the animations for them look great and are fluid to play, since you can assign spells to buttons rather than the old scroll and cast like in Souls games. This is where I think they one-upped From Software. Now, shields are not as strong as in Souls games because they have less damage reduction, but you do have a wither system akin to Liza P and Bloodborne that let you recover any block damage back, even all the way back up to full, if you don't get hit clean before then. I would say the game is accessible to any skill level of player, in terms of actually using the combat mechanics. The one negative I will say here for player side is bouncing. There's so many tight areas that you have to fight stuff in that you're always bouncing with the longer horizontal swinging weapon, making it frustrating. I even bounced with a lightsaber, which doesn't make sense, so the game could have used a bit more phasing or just bigger hallways to openly swing your weapon. Enemy side, combat, decent. Very Dark Souls 1 or 3S, their movesets aren't too complex, their attack speed and interval is generous for you to react and counter, so nothing felt cheap from an individual standpoint, except one enemy, but it's got an easy counter I figured out later. Hitboxes seem pretty good, the damage they deal and damage you deal to them seems balanced. Unlike Liza P, another Souls-like, enemies also had good hit stuns, so you felt like your hits actually hurt the enemy, which also gave you breathing room to keep on the offensive. And you can be pretty powerful with the right weapon and upgrades, which is a power trip I expect of these games, so combat, thumbs up. Number 2, bosses. They have great designs, but they were on the easier side, where I pretty much 1 or 2 attempted most of them, since their movesets weren't totally complex for the most part, and their attack speed was rather slow, but the animations and effects were well done I think, so as far as the spectacle goes, they were cool. But yeah, easy. Which may be a negative, since people do play these games for the hard bosses, right? But some incorporate the umbral mechanic, which force a player to deviate from the usual combat to deal with the umbral mission, usually purifying a small blue parasite. Upon kill though, for the major bosses, you can buy various weapons, armor, and spells from their remembrances. You do have to buy them, but it's not that big a deal. Overall, the game has 30 bosses, but several times you would beat a boss and then it would instantly become a mini boss in the levels right after you beat them, so the quality count, I would argue, is around 20 unique bosses realistically. If you're looking for a challenge, these might disappoint you. Speaking of gear though, the armors look amazing. There are a ton of them, so armors are really good, providing lots of variance in look, weight, and damage reduction, and you can change the color of them with the tint system. Weapons, the same. A lot of variance and scalings, and what damage type they deal, like bleed or burn or poison. You can equip runes to a weapon to change or boost the scaling, among other effects. You have a variety of rings, variety of amulets, variety of spells between the three elements of Radiance, Infernal, and Umbral, useful throwing items, etc, etc. So combat, gear, bosses. Well done for a smaller studio. Online, I haven't tested it outside of one-shotting some random invader. I'm a solo player, I don't co-op, so no comment on online, unfortunately. Next, graphics. Pretty game. Unreal 5 engine definitely hard carries, and yeah, graphics are fantastic. Aesthetically, the Umbral world looks amazing. I really like the designs of that, and honestly, I think the world should have just been all in the Umbral world. Screw the living world, at least in terms of aesthetics and art direction. Also, the game does have a character creator, but the models are pretty unsightly. Story-wise, the game seems like it has a good amount of lore and backstory. It's a simple plot of purify 5 beacons to weaken or stop the big baddie of the game. But this is where the good ends. For the only thing in the meh category is Umbral World. This one's subjective. I like the idea of it. As I said, the aesthetics are very cool. You enter Umbral on death, or you can enter manually, changing the area not completely but majorly. And it is pretty seamless when you do so, so big ups there. But you mostly use this to get additional items you can't see in the living world, or unlock shortcuts and new pathways among fighting new enemies as well. However, as much as I would like to check and explore the world, the downsides outweigh the positives. You have infinitely respawning enemies that are tied to a gauge, and once you reach full, death itself comes seeking you. There's a multiplier that gives you more souls, but you're kind of overwhelmed too much where you can't take advantage of that unless you have a good build. Basically, it feels like you're constantly rushed with no room to chill out and admire your surroundings or check out your inventory, etc. So it's got its ups and downs, but it does make the game unique in identity to other clones, so I'd like to see this in their next game, just done better. Now, negative time. We'll start off with subjective complaints, that is my opinion. They might not matter or affect your enjoyment, but again, my opinion. Subjectively, I don't think the sound effects or animations are that good. Dodge and movement has too much momentum, it looks and feels odd. The roll distance when you have the camera unlocked is way too far. It always feels like you're gonna fall off the edge in the many traversing sections of the game. The run animation looks like you're holding in a poop with some armor sets. Although it's fast speed, which initially felt odd, now makes sense given the major complaint of the game. But sound effects. Parry sound effects and visuals are too subtle, kind of hard to differentiate between normal blocking and parrying. Some weapons and sounds don't feel impactful. The animation for the bonfire like rest is just a loading screen, kind of lazy. So yeah, sound animations not the greatest. The recent Lies of P, another Soulslike I mentioned earlier, was done way better in the sound and animation department, and that was done by a small studio as well. So no excuses. Now, let's move on to the 3 major issues. Actually 2 now, because they fixed performance for me. Well, for the most part. I cannot tell you how agonizing the game was with the FPS drops I had. Basically, I was playing on hard mode. This is the FPS I had going through some areas with the 3070 i7. Yes, that bad. Several areas were like this. There was also a memory leak thing that led to worse performance, but this FPS I got in this area and a couple others were still present after a restart, so it drove me nuts. But with the new patch they dropped today before embargo, this is how it runs through the same area. Much smoother. It's still not 100% perfect, still getting 2 to 5 FPS drops here and there, and I likely can't do 120 FPS like Lies of P for example, but much better. And this is at 1440p because I don't play at 1080p like a scrub. But yeah, bravo! No need for delay anymore, Omega lol. But there are still some bugs and enemy AI issues, I assure you, but happy performance got better. PS5 also seemed to be better after this patch too. Lucky devs, hardworking devs. Now for the last complaints that are objectively done bad. Sorry to say. First off, level design and exploration. The game has an interconnected world like Dark Souls 1, and the game's pretty big. However, the main routes are not that clear, either due to just confusing level design or particles and stuff obscuring your view, and then you have the umbral on top of that you need to search. But personally, I thought it was more confusing than any Souls game ever, which I think have great level design, which is what makes those games so good. Also, hard checkpoints were minimal in the game, meaning the run speed makes sense now, because you're gonna run back through areas over and over. They have a vestige system, which is a one-time temporary spawn point that you can reapply, but the amount of seeds you get is minimal, forcing you to farm up and buy them. Also, they actively trick players by putting those seed beds in boss areas, which in reality, beyond the boss area, is usually a hard checkpoint or a better seed bed to use the seed on, making the boss spawn points kind of pointless unless there's like a PvP reason, but there is no reason for them to not make a hard checkpoint after killing a boss, like in Souls games. That just works better. And I guarantee players are just going to waste seeds on them for no reason. Also, there were a few areas that had no hard checkpoints at all, so going back to an area, if you did miss something, is going to be a nuisance because there's no hard checkpoint. And because your vestige spawn moves with you in your latest one, you will not have that when you try to go back to an old area. But this whole exploration thing wouldn't be so bad if the next complaint wasn't a bigger problem though, which is enemies, mobs. I mentioned it in my impressions video and it only became worse. There are too many enemies, and because of the exploration thing, this game becomes a real chore to explore and fight in, and backtrack after you die. Every room has 3 to 5 enemies, not including umbral zombos that spawn infinitely. Of those 3 to 5 enemies, 2 or 3 of them are ranged, shooting you from a distance with sniper-like range, by the way, where you cannot lock onto them, but they can somehow still shoot you. And some fire enemies can shoot you through walls as well, which was super annoying, so I cannot stress this enough. Every single area, ranged enemies, ranged enemies. This all makes an additional problem, bad enemy variety. Because you're seeing so much enemies, you're seeing the same ones over and over and over again, copy pasted in every single area. The same pilgrims, the same dogs, etc. The game only had like 2 areas where they had a unique set of enemies that weren't reused. So the amount of enemies makes me think the game was designed for co-op first, at the sake of kind of ruining solo. So I just didn't have fun exploring most of the time. I couldn't enjoy the combat. I couldn't guard and regain wither. I couldn't parry or do cool moveset swaps because I had to deal with so much bullshit thrown at me constantly. And that's just the living world. Again, Umbral adds that much more enemies, which spawn infinitely. So if you're curious about difficulty, all the difficulty is simply because of these 2 problems. All your deaths are going to be through levels, not banging your head against the boss for hours. And by the way, the level thing is excluding invasions. Once this game goes online to the masses, then you will also have to deal with invaders as well, since they can invade you even if you're solo, unless you go offline or unless you buy an item to prevent them. And apparently in New Game Plus, you can only have 1 moving checkpoint for the whole game. There are no hard checkpoints, only vestige seeds. So I don't know if New Game Plus will be that populated because of that. As far as game length, it took me under 30 hours to beat the game on one ending. I am sure I missed stuff, but expect a runtime between 30 to 50 hours, depending how much you'll struggle with the level exploration. Now for a slight spoiler, as far as the ending I got, that was one of the worst final bosses I ever fought. Huge letdown. By the way, there are 4 lock classes you can unlock in the game, and 3 are tied behind the 3 endings. I got this one, which is a cool paladin class kind of thing, so for platinum chasers, you will need to beat the game 3 times to get that platinum. Good luck. So, final verdict, 7.5 out of 10. It was worse than that before the patch, obviously. But if they adjusted the enemy count and made exploration a bit more clear, and maybe made the bosses a bit more harder, they could get a higher score. But until then, another Soulslike, another reason From Software is GOAT, where they get everything right and not just a few things. But not bad, Lords of the Fallen, not bad. We'll see how the online and stuff goes before we make a full conclusion, right? But hope you guys enjoy my honest review. Leave a like if you did, and comment down below your thoughts on Lords of the Fallen after trying it, or will you be getting the game after reading reviews? I do still plan to make a tips video and build video, so either of those videos might be up a day or 2 after, so check them out. Now there is respec in the game, so maybe I'll toy with that and make some more builds, I don't know. But if you don't want to miss those, subscribe for more Lords of the Maze Runner epicness.